The 2010 story, the craziest year of my life. A story that I've been teasing for a long time, a story that I've never told. And I feel like I need to give a little bit of context to what happened that year a little bit. But also I want to phrase or preface this with that I'm not encouraging any use of substances. I'm just giving my experience mostly as a warning, even though there is some funny, crazy moments in this. There's also some pretty scary moments and of things that I went through during this time. I'm just sharing my personal experience. I also had a parent that reached out to me and told me that I should tell the story. This person told me that their son was taking LSD, as I did on this story that I'm going to tell you, and I took other substances. And this person told me once their son started taking it, and this is not the experience for everybody. I mean, you never know. People have underlying conditions, mental health. Even if you don't, you just don't know how stuff is going to hit you or you're going to react. And so this person, after one time, they kept doing it over and over. I think they were microdosing. I believe they had some sort of issues, and eventually they offed themselves. I've never told this story. I've always wanted to tell it for a multitude of reasons. I've always been afraid that well, what if one day I'm going to get a job and they just pull this video up? But I think I'm too far into YouTube that I'm not saying it can never happen that I have to go look for a job, but I'm too far in to go back, and I want to share this experience for other people as a warning, or people that can relate, or maybe people going through it. And let me just give you a little bit of context for 2010. Okay, that year, my father passed away. And the context is not an excuse. I'm just telling you what happened that year. Personally, I like to experiment. I like to try different pills, supplements. And so with substances as well, I was kind of curious. But that year in 2010, my dad passed away. One day I got a call from my mother, and she's like, I need to talk to you, and I needed to do it in person. I was like, oh, this is probably serious. I go over there, we sit on the couch, and, she tells me he offed himself, and I was surprised. I was shocked. For a long time as a kid, I looked at him as a kid, I looked at him as a hero. As I got older and I would visit him once in a while, I could tell there was something a little off. And I still, when you're dealing with that with somebody in your family, you always wonder if that's what really happened. He did it in Dominican Republic. So I always had the thought in my head, did somebody do this to him, or did he really do that to himself? I just never thought, but that's what it was. And that's what I was told. The story of my dad and my relationship with him is longer, but for brevity and to stick to the context of 2010. So I find out he passed away. In 2010, I was curious to experiment with substances, ecstasy, particularly. I had a friend that offered me, I was in a relationship at the time, and I expressed to that person that I was curious to try. She didn't want to. So eventually, I think I broke it off. Something happened. That relationship was over. And I started experimenting with ecstasy, and it was amazing back then. It was the actual real stuff. You could test it. It would turn purple. A lot of the stuff now is synthetic and fake, does not turn that color. But my experience was amazing. I mean, they used to use that for therapy. At one point it was legal, then it became illegal, all that stuff. My first time doing X, I'll never forget it. I remember the entire experience. I'm not going to go through that now because that would take away from the craziest day of my life. But the first time I did X was the first time I did whippets, aka nitrous oxide, aka laughing gas, happy gas, whatever they call it. And I just, to say the least, it was insane. I was literally tasting. I was literally feeling the flavors. I would get a lollipop in my mouth, and it was like strawberry. It wasn't just that I would taste the strawberry, I would feel the strawberry throughout my entire body. And there's a lot of ups and downs and pros and cons with that substance as well. That's probably my favorite substance that I've ever done. And one day there's this music festival, the Sunset Music Festival, just kind of skipping forward to the craziest day. There was many days that were kind of crazy, but this is the one that takes the cake. But I go to this event, and I go to an event with a friend. We're co-workers, all right? And I go there with 5 pills, yellow monkeys. Okay, my friend does too. I'm in this long line. The video of Sunset Music Festival 2010 is still on YouTube. You can see me in the beginning. I didn't post it. It was the company that posted it. You can see me standing in line. I had this shirt that said free hugs. And let me tell you, everybody, you walk to a place like that. It was a warehouse type of party in Miami, over town. It started in the day, early afternoon. You wear a shirt like that to an event like this, everybody, all from any gender, is walking up to you. Hey, I'd love a hug. And you just give them the hugs because you know they're on that stuff. So you can literally see me in line standing there with my sunglasses for this event. And so I get into the event. I met quite a few people there. I ended up separating from the friend that I was with because I'm the type of person, especially on that I kind of like to just go and explore. And if you're not into going and exploring, then I'll just go on my own. And that's what I did. Eventually, I ran into somebody that was selling acid, LSD. And I bought 2 because I was thinking of my friend. I was like, maybe he'll want to take one too. Now, at that time, I had done a lot of research on X. I hadn't done much research on LSD. And when I went to my friend, he was like, no, I'm good. I was all right. And I had asked the person that I got the LSD from, how long does it take to kick in? He told me something like 15 minutes, which FYI is incorrect. I've heard it can take much longer. It can take 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It just all depends. So if you're only 15 minutes in, you shouldn't go ahead and take another one like I did, especially in your first time tripping. This was my first time tripping. I also bought 1 extra pill. I think by this time I had gone through the 5 pills. I don't know how many hours it was. 5 is a lot. Then I bought another one, a 6th one, and I had 2 hits of acid that I bought. One of the rules to this kind of stuff is you should never buy at an event. If you're watching this, you're young, or you're just your friends or whatever, you should never buy something at an event because there's just so many dangers and there's little incentive for them to get you a quality product when you'll probably never see them again after that night. Anyway, so I take the 6 at some point in that night. I take the hit of acid. I put it under my tongue, walking around 15 minutes in. I don't feel nothing. And my friend didn't want the second one. So I'm thinking, and I wasn't probably thinking at all, I take the second hit of acid and I put it under my tongue after 15 minutes. 6 rolls and 2 hits of acid. The rest is history. From this point on, there's bits and pieces. It was already nighttime. A couple of things that I remember. And by the way, this story, this day, I believe this is where my anxiety came from in general. I never used to really have an anxiety. I mean, I have it now, but it's not, I've learned to overcome. I feel like this is the source of my general anxiety. When I have it, when I get it, it's from this day. I remember bits and pieces of that night. I remember people looking at me, staring at me. I was clearly inebriated. I had no alcohol though. Thank God. A couple of people were looking at me and I remember them saying, he's tripping. And I remember them saying, he's having a bad trip. Once I heard the words, and the whole thing to tripping, you got to have people around you that are positive. They know what they're doing. If there's somebody sober, careful what they say, because whatever is said, whatever's around you, you will absorb that. So just somebody saying, and I wasn't even thinking it, you're having a bad trip is enough to put you in that bad trip. And that night, it was going to happen regardless whether somebody said it or not. But I remember hearing that and I started freaking out. I remember the music that was playing, after a while, it became redundant. Like it was repeating. Like I was stuck. Anybody that's ever tripped, you might know the feeling that I'm talking about. The sense of time, the perception of time was gone. I thought I was stuck. I kept seeing things kind of repeating. I kept hearing the music just not changing. I was listening for a different tempo, a different beat. I was just stuck. At one point, I remember I was in a room. It seemed like everybody was messed up. I didn't know what was going on. That whole event was just giving me bad vibes. I needed to leave. I was freaking out. The environment, which is really important when you're tripping, was not a good environment. I really don't recommend that kind of thing, especially when you're first tripping or anything like that. When I went to that event, I went in my friend's car. So at this point, I'm freaking out and I'm leaving the event and I have no way of transportation. And I didn't think to let me contact my friend. All I'm thinking, I'm like in survival mode and let me just get out of here. So it took me a while. I finally get out of there. Now I'm walking the streets of Overtown by myself, tripping. Not a good thing. At one point, I remember, see, there's parts in this night that some of it I'm wondering, was it real or was it just in my head? And so at one point, I remember like being on the floor. It was dark. It was nighttime, concrete. And there was people laughing at me, like pointing at me, just like laughing. Ah, like, somebody just messed up. And so I remember that vividly. At another point in time, I don't know why, I took off my shoes. I took off my socks. Apparently I took off took out my wallet, my phone, my keys, took it off, left it on the ground. At one point, there were several times, this is a night that I could have died, without a doubt. At one point, I saw myself in third person. Literally. Like, I had an outer body experience. I saw myself from like third person outside. I see myself on the floor struggling. Okay. I couldn't tell whether I was alive or dead. I was wondering. I thought I died. I thought I'm seeing myself dead. That's what happened to me at one point at that night. And there's kind of a lot that happens here, and it's kind of crazy. At one point, the thing was, I think the reason I took my clothes off is because I was overheating. I felt super hot. 6 pills, 2 hits of acid. I'm hot. I started taking off my clothes. I already took off my pants. I had like a little backpack or something. I took everything off and I was just in boxers. At one point, while I'm in boxers, I start climbing cars. I don't remember the exact sequence of which was first or whatever, because a lot of these events that happened, I started to remember it all the next day. But I start to climb cars. I'm laying on cars. I'm so hot that the metallic feeling or whatever it was of me laying on the car just cooled me down. It felt good. I was super thirsty. I climbed a couple of cars. I even went up to a couple of doors. I went up some stairs to the second floor. I was looking in door holes and like looking under. I was freaking out because I couldn't tell. I thought I was dead. I was thinking like I'm in some other alternate dimension, or maybe this isn't real, but it was very real. And at one point I come back downstairs. At one point I take off my boxers and I'm completely naked. And while completely naked, like the previous time where people were pointing at me and laughing, and I was sitting on the curb or something that time, I went to sit on the curb again, but on the grass, because the grass was wet. It was like some water. I don't know if it was like dew or like it had been recently sprinkled with water. And so it just felt cool to sit on the grass. So now I'm sitting on the grass completely naked. And I start to feel this biting sensation. Like, what the hell is that? And at one point I'm thinking, is this real? Is this fake? But the sensation was so strong. I was like, this has to be real. I got up. Apparently I sat on a fire ant hill. I can't make this shit up. A fire ant hill where the ants started crawling all over it. And I brushed them off, went and got my boxers, put the boxers back on. See, I had like lapses between making good judgments and like coming back to reality, and then where I was just trying to figure out, is this really reality or not? A couple of times when I was walking, I would see cars. And let me tell you, in Overtown, I guess this is like a normal thing. Nobody stopped to offer me help. I would see cars driving by, and part of me thought, maybe I should just walk out onto the road and see. Is it going to hit me? Is it not? Is this real? Is this not? At one point, I went up to this car and I had to pee. And so I'm peeing. And so in my head, I don't know what it was. I take my hand and I start peeing on my hand because I'm like, I wonder if this is real or not. And it was real. It was warm. It was weird. So after all that weirdness, I start to walk down some main road. I'm like in survival mode. Some weird sketch guy walks up next to me and he was like, yo, you should really put some pants on or some clothes. It's not safe. It's kind of dangerous. This is a bad area. Overtown, Florida, South Florida is a bad area. The guy was weirding me out. After a certain point, he kind of left from me. As I was walking down this road, a cop car did drive by me. Never stopped. I was walking completely naked, just in boxers. Never stopped. I did see like a convenience store. I don't know why I didn't walk to the convenience store. It was across the street, but I didn't. I kept walking until I get to this bar. And I get to this, I believe it was a Mexican bar. I walk in in boxers, okay? I go to sit at the bar. I can't even remember people's faces or reactions because I just walked in that shit like I owned it. And I sat at the bar, and when I was looking over the bar, I saw like they had milk or something. I literally stood over the chair and over the bar thing, and I went to go reach, and some lady screamed at me, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, shit, okay." And I just said, "Listen, I'm desperate. I'm thirsty. I'm not doing good." The lady was kind enough. There was two kind people in this story. The lady was kind enough. She gave me a can of Sprite and I think a bottle of water. And I drank that. Can of Sprite, bottle of water. And at the time, it was like amazing. It felt like a lifesaver. Maybe it did save me. I don't know. At another point in part in this story, and I'm just in boxers, I walk up. Okay, there's two events that happen here. One, I walked up to this house and I was knocking. There was like a gate in front of the door and I was like knocking on the gate. The lady looked at me and she was like freaked out. And then she looked at me again, freaked out. I think she might have called the cops. I left, freaked out myself. Then I went to this little, I don't even know how to describe it. There was an apartment there, it looked like. There was a car parked in front of the apartment. I was so desperate and so thirsty. Like literally, I was to the point where I thought I was going to die. Like I thought I was dead or dying. And so there was this car and I just tried to open the doors. The back door opened, the back seat. The car is full of like empty bottles of water, Gatorade, but like they're all empty. It's just a car that's trashed with junk everywhere. I literally grabbed the bottles. I grabbed like 2 or 3 bottles. I opened them and some of them were already open, but I just poured the couple of drops that were in the bottles. I just poured it into my mouth and I drank that. That's how I felt. I felt like as much as like my mind was out of it, I was also thinking survival. Like your whole, even tripping and all this kind of stuff. When you get to a point where you think you're going to die, everything just changes. And so I'm taking a couple of drops of water. I walk to the apartment that's closest to that car. I don't know if I left the door open to the car or whatever. I think I must have left the door open because I walked and I finally got the courage to, I knocked on previous doors. I knocked on the one where the lady came out. That story where I said I went up to the 2nd floor, I did knock on the door, but nobody answered. Anyway, back to this one. So I'm walking in front of the car. I go to the apartment that's closest to the car. I knock on the door. Person comes out screaming, "What the F are you doing here? What the F is wrong with you?" They're going off. So I start to back up and I back up towards the car. They come out towards me. They see the car doors open and they're like, "What the F are you doing?" Blah, 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 blah. They're cursing me out. At one point, they pull out a gun. And I've never had a gun pulled on me. This was the first time. I always thought if somebody pulled a gun, I'd freeze. I just ran. And I'm barefoot. I hauled ass. And the guy shot like a warning shot into the air. I believe it was in the air. I don't know if he shot it at me. I believe he shot the gun into the air. I'll never forget that. And I ran. I ran like I've never run in my life before. We got a couple of instances that have happened here. And then I'm going to get to the next one. I I sit at the curb. People are laughing at me. I strip my clothes off. I take off my wallet, my cell phone. I don't have any way to contact anybody. I wasn't even thinking. Then I go walking around. I literally walked on cars. I'm surprised nobody called the cops, and like I wasn't like arrested. I'm climbing on cars, laying on cars, walking up to doors. I walk up to the second floor of one place. I knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I come back down, take off my boxers, sit on the grass, and literally sit on a fire ant hill, which wasn't my first time getting consumed by fire ants. I've had that happen before in Louisiana. So, and by the way, I thought that instance was fake. And the next day when I was home and I slept a little bit, it was my crotch area that the ants bit me on. So I had all these bumps all over. It was crazy. So I had that, put my boxers back on. I went and knocked on the gate to the door of one place. That door was actually open and there was a light coming from the inside, but the gate was like, you can't just enter because there's a gate there. And so that's why, I don't know, I went up to the door and I knocked. I think at that point, like I just wanted help, but I don't know why I couldn't verbalize it. It was almost like you're in a dream. And the common sense things that you could do, it just wasn't happening. Like I wasn't doing it. From there, then I went to that Mexican bar, which was just insane. And the one Spanish lady screaming at me and she offered me 2 drinks, sent me on my way. And from there, I'm just walking towards the beach. I'm thinking survival. Eventually, I'm going to run into something or somebody. I come across this bridge, kind of a long bridge, but to this very fancy, luxurious area. As I'm crossing the bridge, I can see like the ocean. Several times in my head, the thought came, maybe I should jump in the water. Not because I wanted to hurt myself or I was trying to find the perception of reality, but because I was really freaking hot. I was overheating. Like my whole entire body just felt like just hot. And so I was walking across the bridge. I was looking at the water. Thank God I had lapses of reality where I told myself, but I seriously considered getting in the water. I told myself, no, this is a bad idea. Thank God I was able to have that. I crossed the bridge and there was this security person, like a security booth. I don't know if it was like a hotel or something. It was by like South Beach, I think, or somewhere in Miami, this really fancy area. And I walk up to this booth. It was this lady. And I'm like, please, call a cab or call the police. So she called the cab. But she was very like worried, very, just kind of like. And I was like, tell them, my family member is going to pay, please. She calls a cab. They come out there. The guy pulls. It took a while. Perception of time was messed up. It took a while. The guy in the cab finally shows up. And he pulls up and he's looking at me. I look a mess. Not only am I just in boxers, I look a mess. And he took a chance on me. And I had to call my mother on the phone. Melvin! I was like, I need to get home and I don't have any way to pay for it. I didn't tell the whole story. I was like, I need to get home. I don't have my wallet. So she's like, okay, or I'm going to pay you whatever. Okay. Guys giving me a ride. I forgot the conversations that we had, but as we're driving back to the house, literally the sun's coming out. It's becoming daylight. And I felt such a sense of relief. And I arrived home and I got out the car and I was in boxers. My feet had all kinds of sores on them. My feet were jacked up. I could barely walk by the time I got home. I had all kinds of scars and like marks on my body. I didn't know where it came from. Not really scars, but just bruises, I would say. That I didn't know where it came from. And that was the craziest night of my life. That night, or that day, or the following days, I was still hearing little sounds. I couldn't tell. It was the stuff in my system still. I would still hear little bloop, 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 like little things. And I think that's where the anxiety came from. For a while after that, I would stare at the clock just to make sure that the minute would change, just so I know that time was like, if I was in a place where nothing was really happening and things were just dead still, looking at the time would comfort me, just knowing that I'm not stuck in this, whatever this is. Time's actually moving and going, which time, it really is perception. Time really is kind of like the clock, and everything is a social construct, really. But it really is just perception. But I just found comfort in that, knowing the time is going. I only told my mother that I did X. I didn't tell her about the acid, LSD. I don't even know if it was that. I think it was that, but who knows? Maybe it could have been a research chemical. And yeah, that was, I don't think she ever looked at me the same for a very long time. She cried that day. It was really tough. It was freaking crazy. That next day after the incident happened, like I was literally searching for myself on Google, like my name, because I'm thinking maybe I'm in the news, maybe somebody recorded me, maybe there was a video. Back then, I guess not that many people were recording or doing all that stuff, and so there was nothing. There was nothing. Had something like that happen to me this day and age, oh, it would be all over the place, especially now my status. That's why sometimes I say too that if it wasn't for my daughter, I'd probably never be here. This is a 2010 incident. My daughter was born in 2016. I've never done a substance since she was born. I take my supplements. I have a whole cabinet full of substances. I drink still, which, they say two people substitute one thing for the other. But it's very possible that had it not been for my daughter, I'd probably never be here. I probably would have died. I probably would have kept doing whatever it was I was doing. That's why I say that sometimes when I reference it. I also sometimes reference Dave Chappelle when he talks about that tripping story with shrooms, which is a really funny story, but the perception of time that he had, that everything happened, all this stuff happened in 1 minute. That's what happened to me on acid, but I didn't really know what was going on, because after acid, then I tripped on shrooms once. And during that shroom trip, I realized what was happening. The perception of time, it was just stretching. Just stretching. Everything felt like forever. Would I ever trip again? I don't know. I would definitely do it in a more controlled environment if I did. I can't see myself. I feel like I've gone through too much in life to like trip again. Would I roll again? I don't know either. I'd have to definitely test the stuff. And I would have to have like the weekend, like, no kid. I mean, it's just a whole different ball game now with the kid and what I do now. And I can't say that I would never do it again. Or like, I mean, ayahuasca, like all those different experiences that I've heard of kind of scare me. But I would definitely never go crazy like I did back then. Throughout those years, it was a couple of years that I was doing it, that I was just going out, partying, having fun, running, escaping. A lot of the things that I learned is that a lot of those relationships were not really real. A lot of those people that were around me at the time were just around me to party, have fun, get high. They're just not real. And when you're going through stuff, they're not going to be there. Also, I think that's where the anxiety of large crowds came from. I didn't like to be in places fully packed, people on top of you, and like you can't even breathe. I think it developed around that time. There would be times where I would go to places with friends and it was so packed, I'd just leave. You can come with me or you could stay, and I'd leave. Do I regret the experience? No. I feel like I needed that. I feel like that sat me down on my ass. Even though I still continued after that for a little bit, like partying, I toned it back a little bit. It was a reality check. I don't regret that stuff. I feel like I needed that at that point in my life. Thank God I'm alive. Not everybody gets that lucky, to survive or go through those things. It was definitely, I guess, a life-altering experience. Can I say it was because my dad? I don't know. I like to experiment. I had fun those times. After a while, that partying club thing got old after a while. It was the same thing all the time. I used to think that it was like this exclusive thing, like the secret club. And then once you start going to those places, you realize everybody's doing it. And if you think it's just like, I don't know, what people might perceive as like lowly people or losers, you're fairly mistaken. I've known professionals great jobs, careers, doing that stuff, going out partying, substances. Even at some of these clubs and stuff, you can tell these people, they have money, so it's not just like something like that you would think only one group you might classify as doing that.